Iwo Jima, February 23, 1945, 0530 hours, and Colonel Takeichi Nishi, commanding the tank regiment defending the northern plateau, stands in the reinforced concrete command bunker, watching American Marines struggle through volcanic ash below, confident that his interlocking network of caves, pillboxes, and fortified positions will bleed the invaders white for weeks to come. The defenses represent 2 years of engineering genius. Reinforced concrete bunkers with walls 3 feet thick. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Interconnected tunnel systems allowing defenders to disappear and reappear at will. Steel doors protecting ammunition magazines, and firing ports designed to create overlapping fields of fire that turn every approach into a killing zone. What Colonel Nishi cannot possibly know, what no Japanese officer could imagine, despite all their preparation and tactical brilliance, is that American engineers have created a weapon that will turn his impregnable fortress into a crematorium. And within 6 hours, modified Sherman tanks mounting pressurized flame projectors capable of shooting napalm 150 yards will pour liquid fire through the steel doors and concrete embrasures he's counted on to protect his men, burning through metal, boiling the air inside sealed chambers, and creating temperatures that will make his fortifications into ovens that consume everything inside them. The confidence of Japanese defenders on Iwo Jima comes from brutal experience and careful preparation. Major Yoshitaka Horii, responsible for fortification construction, has spent 18 months transforming the volcanic island into what he calls an underground battleship, using the natural cave systems and volcanic rock to create defensive positions that conventional weapons cannot destroy. The fortifications incorporate lessons learned from Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu, where Japanese defenders discovered that even massive naval bombardment and aerial attacks could not eliminate well-constructed bunkers. Lieutenant General Tademichi Kuribayashi, overall commander of Iwo Jima's defense, has issued strict orders forbidding banzai charges, instead demanding that every position be defended to the last man, that every Marine advancement cost maximum American casualties, and that the island's 21,000 defenders make the Americans pay in blood for every yard of volcanic ash. The defensive network represents Japanese military engineering at its most sophisticated and deadly. Each major position includes multiple firing ports, ventilation systems to clear gun smoke, reinforced steel doors that can withstand direct hits from tank rounds, and emergency exits allowing defenders to retreat through tunnels when positions become untenable. Captain Samaji Hinue, commanding a network of bunkers on Hill 382, has personally supervised construction of positions with overhead cover exceeding 6 feet of reinforced concrete, with additional layers of volcanic rock and steel rails salvaged from the island's narrow-gauge railway. The firing ports are designed with offset angles that prevent direct fire from penetrating, while allowing Japanese machine guns and anti-tank weapons to engage approaching enemies. Internal chambers are equipped with blast doors that compartmentalize the bunkers, theoretically preventing the spread of damage if one section is compromised. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Japanese defensive doctrine for island warfare has evolved significantly since 1942, abandoning the suicidal beach defenses that proved so costly in favor of defense in depth that maximizes American casualties while preserving Japanese combat power as long as possible. Lieutenant Colonel Baron Nishi,
a 1932 Olympic gold medalist in equestrian events who now commands tanks buried hull-deep as stationary pillboxes, understands that his Type 95 Ha-Go tanks are obsolete against American Shermans in mobile warfare. But transformed into fortified gun positions with only their turrets exposed, they become nearly invulnerable strongpoints. The Japanese have carefully studied American tactics, noting the reliance on preparatory bombardment followed by infantry tank teams, and have designed their defenses specifically to counter these methods. Machine gun positions are sited to create interlocking fire that separates American infantry from their supporting tanks. Anti-tank guns are positioned in reverse slope positions that make them invisible until they fire. And the entire defensive network is connected by tunnels, allowing reinforcement of threatened positions. The weapons defending Iwo Jima include not just small arms and machine guns, but also 47mm anti-tank guns, 75mm mountain guns, 120mm naval guns emplaced in concrete casemates, and even 320mm spigot mortars capable of lobbing massive projectiles onto American formations. Sergeant Kiyoshi Endo, commanding a 47mm anti-tank gun on the Motoyama Plateau, has practiced his firing drill until his crew can load and fire 3 rounds in less than 20 seconds, targeting the vulnerable side armor of Sherman tanks that must expose themselves to engage Japanese positions. The anti-tank gun is positioned behind a steel shield and protected by a concrete bunker with walls reinforced by volcanic rock, creating a position that has withstood 3 days of naval bombardment without significant damage. Japanese gunners understand they must allow American tanks to close within 400 yards before engaging, trading safety for the higher probability of penetrating hits at close range. What makes February 23, 1945 fundamentally different from every previous day of combat on Iwo Jima is not immediately apparent to the Japanese defenders who have successfully repelled multiple American attacks over the previous 4 days. Lieutenant Toshio Kobayashi, observing from a reinforced observation post on Hill 382, reports American armor forming up near the base of the hill, standard Sherman tanks that his anti-tank crews have engaged before with mixed results. The tanks appear identical to those encountered throughout the campaign, M4A3 Shermans with 75mm guns, moving cautiously through terrain broken by shell craters and volcanic ridges, supported by infantry using every fold in the ground for cover. Japanese observers note the tanks advancing in small groups, precisely following the tactics Americans have employed since D-Day. What they do not yet see, what they cannot yet comprehend, are the 8 specialized tanks moving into position behind the standard Shermans, vehicles that appear similar at first glance, but carry equipment that will fundamentally alter the nature of combat on Iwo Jima.
The development of flame tanks represents American military innovation driven by the brutal realities of Pacific Island warfare, where Japanese defenders transformed every island into a fortress that consumed Marine lives at horrifying rates. Major General Holland Smith, commander of expeditionary troops for the Iwo Jima operation, personally requested flame tanks after witnessing the carnage on Saipan, where conventional weapons proved inadequate against reinforced bunkers and cave positions. The Chemical Warfare Service, working with Marine Corps engineers, developed the POA-CWS H5 flamethrower system, a pressurized flame projector replacing the main gun of a standard Sherman tank. The system consists of a flame gun mounted in a dummy 75mm gun barrel, a pressurized fuel tank containing 290 gallons of napalm, nitrogen pressure bottles to propel the fuel, and an ignition system that transforms the napalm stream into a jet of liquid fire reaching temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The technical specifications of the POA-CWS H5 represent a quantum leap beyond man-portable flamethrowers that had proven useful but limited in previous campaigns.
Technical Sergeant Robert Dunlap, a chemical warfare service technician who helped install the systems at Pearl Harbor, explains that the pressurized system can project flame up to 150 yards in optimal conditions, sustaining fire for approximately 80 seconds of continuous operation, though tactical doctrine calls for short bursts of 3 to 5 seconds to maximize ammunition efficiency. The napalm mixture, a jellied gasoline developed by chemists at Harvard University, adheres to surfaces and continues burning even when spread thin, creating fires that cannot be extinguished by conventional means. The ignition system uses an electric spark rather than a pilot light, preventing the telltale flame that would make the tank an obvious target before it fires. The entire system weighs approximately 3,500 pounds, including fuel, requiring careful weight distribution within the Sherman's hull to maintain proper balance. The flame tank crew's training at Camp Pendleton before deploying to Iwo Jima represent a unique combination of tanker skills and specialized knowledge about flame warfare. Staff Sergeant James Hanlon, tank commander of Satan's Breath, a POA CWS H-5 assigned to the 5th Marine Division, has spent 6 weeks learning the peculiarities of his weapon, understanding that flame tactics differ fundamentally from conventional tank gunnery. Unlike standard tanks that engage targets at maximum effective range, flame tanks must close to within 75 yards for reliable effects, exposing themselves to concentrated enemy fire during their approach. The crew consists of 5 men, the tank commander who directs operations and serves as flame gunner, a driver who must maneuver the 35-ton vehicle across broken terrain while under fire, an assistant driver who manages the pressure system and monitors fuel levels, and 2 additional crew members who serve as loaders for the bow machine gun and coaxial machine gun that provide suppressive fire during flame attacks. Training exercises at 29 Palms in the California desert taught flame tank crews that their weapon creates psychological effects far exceeding its physical destruction. Captain Charles Weisinger, commanding Company C of the 5th Tank Battalion, which includes the flame tank platoon, observed during training that concrete bunkers engulfed in flame remained structurally intact, but their defenders abandoned positions that moments before seemed impregnable. The psychological impact of watching liquid fire pour through firing ports, seeing flames spreading across concrete surfaces searching for any opening, and knowing that the tiniest gap will allow superheated gas and flame to penetrate created panic even among hardened Marines playing Japanese defenders during exercises. The flame's ability to penetrate spaces that bullets and shells cannot reach, flowing around corners and through ventilation systems, makes it uniquely effective against fortified positions where defenders believe themselves protected by thick walls and steel doors. The napalm mixture used in flame tanks represents sophisticated chemistry applied to warfare, transforming ordinary gasoline into a weapon of unprecedented horror. The basic formula combines gasoline with aluminum naphthenate and aluminum palmitate, creating a gel that maintains cohesion during projection while remaining fluid enough to flow through the flame gun. When ignited, napalm burns at temperatures sufficient to melt steel, boil water instantly, and consume oxygen from enclosed spaces, creating conditions that kill through burns, asphyxiation, or carbon monoxide poisoning. Technical documents from the Chemical Warfare Service describe napalm as persistently flaming because the gel continues burning even after the initial projection stops, clinging to surfaces and spreading fire to combustible materials. Japanese defenders trapped in bunkers have no effective countermeasure against napalm that penetrates their fortifications, as water simply spreads the burning gel rather than extinguishing it, and attempting to smother flames with blankets or earth proves futile against fuel that burns hot enough to ignite the smothering materials themselves. The tactical employment of flame tanks requires careful coordination with conventional armor and infantry, as the specialized vehicles are vulnerable during their approach to targets and nearly helpless at ranges beyond their flame projectors' reach. Marine Corps doctrine calls for standard Shermans to suppress enemy positions with high explosive and machine gun fire, while flame tanks advance to firing positions using terrain and smoke for concealment until they're close enough to engage. Lieutenant William Wells, commanding the flame tank platoon assigned to support the 27th Marines attack on Hill 382, has briefed his crews that they will operate in 2 tank sections, with each flame tank paired with a standard Sherman that provides security and suppressive fire. The standard Sherman's 75mm gun can engage bunkers with high explosive rounds that create dust and smoke, degrading Japanese gunners' visibility while the flame tank closes to effective range.
The vulnerability of flame tanks to enemy fire creates constant tension for crews who understand that a single penetrating hit on their fuel tanks will transform their vehicle into a crematorium. The armor protection of the Sherman, adequate against most Japanese anti-tank weapons when striking at favorable angles, offers little comfort to men sitting atop 290 gallons of napalm and high-pressure nitrogen bottles. Corporal Vincent DeMarco, assistant driver on the flame tank Hell's Herald, admits to recurring nightmares about burning alive inside his tank, trapped by hatches jammed shut by battle damage while napalm cooks off around him. The tank crews develop superstitions and rituals meant to ward off the obvious dangers, painting elaborate nose art on their vehicles, carrying religious medals and photographs, and maintaining obsessive attention to equipment maintenance that might prevent mechanical failures at critical moments. Japanese defensive preparations on Iwo Jima include specific countermeasures against American armor, based on experience from previous campaigns where Sherman tanks proved vulnerable to well-sighted anti-tank guns and close assault teams. Sergeant Kaoru Shimizu, commanding an anti-tank team on the Northern Plateau, has trained his men in the use of satchel charges and magnetic mines designed to destroy American tanks that approach Japanese positions. The tactics call for allowing tanks to pass initial defensive lines, then attacking from concealed positions with explosive charges placed against thin rear armor or engine compartments. Japanese infantry are trained to separate American tanks from their supporting infantry by concentrating machine gun and mortar fire on the foot soldiers, then engaging the isolated armor with anti-tank weapons. These tactics have proven effective throughout the Pacific Campaign, destroying hundreds of American tanks and forcing changes in American combined arms doctrine. What Japanese defenders cannot know, what no amount of tactical preparation can address, is that flame tanks operate by completely different rules than conventional armor. The psychological shock of encountering flame weapons for the first time, the horror of watching fire pour through openings thought to be secure, and the realization that thick concrete walls offer no protection against temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees will shatter even the most determined defender's will to resist. The flame tank represents not just a weapon, but a fundamental violation of the implicit contract that soldiers expect from fortifications, that thick walls and overhead cover will protect them from enemy fire. When flame penetrates seemingly impregnable positions, killing men who believed themselves safe, the psychological impact exceeds any physical damage the weapon might cause. The morning of February 23, 1945, begins with the routine that has characterized the previous 4 days of combat on Iwo Jima: massive naval and artillery bombardment of Japanese positions, followed by American infantry and armor attacks that grind forward meters at a time against fanatical resistance. Colonel Nishi, observing from his command bunker, notes the familiar pattern of American tactics, the predictable sequence of bombardment, smoke screens, and combined arms assault that Japanese defenders have learned to counter through discipline and prepared positions. His defensive network has survived everything the Americans have thrown at it, and he has every reason to believe that Hill 382 and the surrounding plateau will remain in Japanese hands for weeks to come, exacting a terrible price in Marine casualties for every yard of ash and rock. At 06:45 hours, Lieutenant Wells receives the order to move his flame tank platoon forward in support of the 27th Marines' renewed assault on Hill 382. The 8 flame tanks, each carrying enough napalm to sustain approximately 80 seconds of firing time, advance from assembly areas behind American lines, moving through lanes marked by engineers through minefields and shell craters. Staff Sergeant Hanlon, commanding Satan's Breath, can see the objective clearly now: a complex of reinforced bunkers and pillboxes on the hillside, their concrete faces scarred by days of bombardment but structurally intact, firing ports spitting machine gun fire that cuts down Marines attempting to advance upslope.
The conventional Sherman tanks supporting the attack are engaging with 75mm high explosive rounds, but the Japanese bunkers show no signs of reduced resistance, their defenders protected by 3 feet of reinforced concrete and volcanic rock overhead. The approach to Hill 382 requires the flame tanks to traverse 600 yards of open ground broken by shell craters and volcanic ridges, all of it covered by Japanese observation in fields of fire. The standard Shermans advance in bounds, providing suppressive fire, while the flame tanks use every bit of available cover, moving from crater to crater in short rushes that minimize exposure to anti-tank fire. Japanese gunners, seeing American tanks advancing, engage with 47mm anti-tank guns and infantry weapons, their rounds sparking off Sherman armor or throwing up geysers of volcanic ash where shells impact. Corporal DeMarco, monitoring his instruments inside Hell's Herald, reports fuel pressure at 300 psi, nitrogen bottles fully charged, ignition system armed and ready. The crew's only defense during the approach is their tank's armor and the suppressive fire from supporting units. Once they begin their flame attack, they will be completely exposed and vulnerable for the seconds required to saturate their target. At 250 yards from the nearest Japanese bunker, Lieutenant Wells orders his first section to prepare for flame attack, the radio call that every crew has been trained to execute, but none has performed in actual combat. Staff Sergeant Hanlon traverses his turret, aligning the dummy 75mm barrel containing his flame gun with a reinforced bunker whose firing port continues spitting machine gun fire at advancing Marines. At 150 yards, he can see details of the bunker's construction, the concrete walls discolored by explosive impacts, the steel door visible behind the firing port, and sandbags stacked to create additional protection. At 100 yards, close enough that Japanese machine gun fire is hammering against his tank's frontal armor, Hanlon gives the command his crew has rehearsed hundreds of times but never executed in combat.
Flame ready! Firing! Sergeant Hanlon squeezes the trigger, and instantly the morning air erupts with something that transcends conventional warfare's boundaries. The pressurized napalm, propelled by 300 pounds of nitrogen pressure, shoots from the flame gun as a coherent stream traveling at 75 feet per second, the electric igniter transforming it into a jet of liquid fire that seems to reach out like a living thing seeking its target. The flame stream, bright orange at its core with darker edges where partially combusted napalm creates rolling black smoke, crosses the 75 yards between tank and bunker in less than 2 seconds, and then the physics of modern chemical warfare intersect with Japanese military engineering. The napalm jet strikes the bunker's firing port with the force of a fire hose, but instead of water that might be blocked or diverted, the burning gel splashes against concrete and steel with temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The flame pours through the firing port opening, designed to allow Japanese machine guns to fire out, but never intended to prevent anything from coming in. Inside the bunker, Sergeant Takeshi Yamada and his 4-man machine gun crew experience something no training or mental preparation could ready them for. The world inside their protected concrete chamber, the space where they've felt safe despite days of bombardment, suddenly fills with liquid fire that flows across the floor, up the walls, across the ceiling, searching every corner and crevice with fingers of flame that burn at temperatures sufficient to ignite human flesh on contact. The napalm, following the laws of physics that make it such an effective weapon, spreads throughout the bunker's interior in seconds, the burning gel clinging to surfaces and continuing to combust while consuming oxygen at a rate that rapidly makes the sealed chamber unbreathable. Sergeant Yamada's last conscious thought, before superheated gas sears his lungs and burning napalm ignites his uniform, is utter incomprehension that the thick concrete walls meant to protect him have instead become the walls of his tomb, trapping him with fire that cannot be escaped or extinguished. The other crew members experience similarly brief moments of horror before flames and oxygen depletion end their suffering, their bodies continuing to burn inside the sealed concrete chamber that was meant to keep them safe. Staff Sergeant Hanlon maintains his flame burst for 5 seconds, pouring approximately 20 gallons of napalm into the bunker before releasing the trigger. The flame jet cuts off instantly,
But the damage is done. The bunker continues to burn internally, black smoke pouring from its firing port and ventilation openings, and the machine gun that had been firing continuously for 4 days falls permanently silent. The crew of Satan's Breath has just proven that flame tanks can accomplish in 5 seconds what days of bombardment and conventional attacks could not: the complete neutralization of a reinforced defensive position through the application of fire in ways Japanese defenders never anticipated and cannot counter. But this is only the beginning. 7 more flame tanks are moving into firing positions, their crews having watched Hanlon's attack and now preparing to replicate it against the network of bunkers and pillboxes that had stalled the Marine advance for days. The Japanese defenders, witnessing something unprecedented in their combat experience, begin to comprehend the true horror of what approaches them. This is not conventional warfare, where thick walls provide protection, not combat where discipline and prepared positions ensure survival, but something fundamentally different and infinitely more terrifying. Lieutenant Wells' second flame tank, Dragon's Roar, commanded by Sergeant Michael O'Brien, engages a pillbox 80 yards distant, the flame stream pouring through an embrasure designed for a 75mm mountain gun. The Japanese gun crew, Corporal Masato Fujiota and his 6 men, watch in frozen horror as liquid fire floods their position, the burning napalm spreading across the floor faster than men can react, igniting ammunition stores that explode with sympathetic detonations, filling the sealed concrete chamber with fire and explosive overpressure that kills men through multiple mechanisms simultaneously: burns, blast effects, asphyxiation, and carbon monoxide poisoning. The psychological effect on Japanese defenders observing these attacks from adjacent positions proves as devastating as the physical destruction of engaged bunkers. Private First Class Hiroshi Nakamura, manning a rifle position 50 yards from the first bunker hit, watches Sergeant Yamada's position burning, seeing black smoke pouring from openings, hearing nothing from the crew that moments before were fighting effectively, understanding that the Americans have deployed a weapon against which concrete walls and steel doors offer no protection. The realization spreads through the defensive network like the flames themselves. There is nowhere safe, no thickness of concrete that will protect against fire that pours through the smallest opening and consumes everything inside sealed spaces.
The 3rd Flame Tank in Lieutenant Wells' section, Inferno's Wrath, commanded by Sergeant Thomas Kellerman, advances toward a particularly formidable position: a reinforced concrete casement housing a Japanese 75mm mountain gun that has been destroying American landing craft on the beaches below for 3 days. The casement represents the pinnacle of Japanese defensive engineering, with walls 4 feet thick, a steel-reinforced door protecting the interior, and multiple compartments connected by blast doors meant to contain damage from penetrating hits. Captain Inoue designed this position personally, ensuring overlapping fields of fire with adjacent bunkers and an escape tunnel allowing the crew to evacuate if necessary. He stands behind his gun crew now, Lieutenant Kazuo Watanabe commanding the piece, believing absolutely that his position can withstand anything the Americans might employ against it. Sergeant Kellerman halts his flame tank at 65 yards from the casement, close enough that he can see the muzzle of the Japanese gun protruding from its embrasure, far enough that the thick frontal armor should protect against a direct hit from the 75mm weapon. His gunner, Corporal James Martinez, aligns the flame gun with practiced precision, accounting for wind that might affect the napalm stream at this range. The Japanese gun crew, focusing on targets near the beach, does not immediately recognize the threat approaching from their flank. When they do notice the Sherman tank with its oddly configured turret, when Lieutenant Watanabe shouts warning and begins traversing his gun toward this new threat, it is already too late. Martinez triggers the flame projector, and 300 psi of pressure sends napalm streaming toward the casement at velocities that cross the distance in less than a second. The burning gel strikes the gun embrasure with perfect accuracy, the flame jet designed specifically to penetrate such openings, pouring through the narrow aperture that was meant to protect the defenders while allowing them to fire outward. Inside the casement,
Lieutenant Watanabe and his 8-man crew experienced the transformation of their fortress into a crematorium. The napalm splashes against the gun breech, flows across the floor where ready ammunition is stored, climbs the walls following paths of least resistance, and fills the sealed chamber with fire that ignites everything combustible while consuming oxygen at rates that make breathing impossible within seconds. Captain Inuaye, standing in the rear compartment separated from the gun chamber by a blast door, hears screams that cut off almost immediately, hears ammunition cooking off in the flames, smells burning flesh and cordite, and understands with absolute clarity that his carefully engineered position has been defeated by a weapon he never anticipated. He orders the evacuation tunnel opened, but the fire has already spread through ventilation ducts into the rear compartment, and the men attempting to open the steel escape hatch find it too hot to touch, the metal heated to temperatures that blister skin on contact. The compartmentalization meant to protect the position now traps its defenders, the blast doors preventing escape while flames methodically consume everything inside each sealed chamber. Sergeant Kellerman maintains his flame burst for 7 seconds, pouring approximately 30 gallons of napalm into the casement, ensuring saturation of every internal space. When he releases the trigger, the casement's gun embrasure resembles the mouth of a blast furnace, orange flame visible deep inside, black smoke boiling out in quantities that suggest the complete combustion of everything flammable within. The 75mm gun that has been terrorizing Marines on the beaches below falls silent permanently, its crew dead within seconds of the flame attack, the gun itself potentially damaged by heat that can warp steel barrels and destroy optical sights. The systematic destruction of Japanese positions continues as flame tanks engage bunker after bunker with methodical precision. Sergeant Patrick Murphy in Hell's Chariot attacks a reinforced pillbox containing a Type 92 heavy machine gun, the flame stream pouring through firing ports and ventilation openings simultaneously, creating a firestorm inside the sealed concrete structure that kills the 6-man crew through multiple mechanisms. The machine gun, which had been firing 450 rounds per minute into advancing Marines, stops mid-burst, the gunner and his assistant dead at their positions, their bodies continuing to burn inside the pillbox that was meant to keep them safe. Private First Class Nakamura, watching from his position 40 yards away, sees flame tank after flame tank methodically engage Japanese positions, sees bunker after bunker erupting in smoke and flame, hears the screams of men dying inside sealed chambers, and understands that the American innovation has rendered obsolete every defensive technique the Japanese have developed. The psychological impact spreads through the Japanese defensive network like a contagion, as soldiers who have held their positions through days of bombardment and infantry assault now face something that bypasses all their preparations and fortifications. The flame does not care about 3-foot concrete walls or steel doors or overhead cover measured in meters. Fire flows through the smallest opening, penetrates every space, and kills with certainty that conventional weapons cannot match. The immediate tactical impact of the flame tank attack becomes apparent within 15 minutes as the network of mutually supporting positions that has stalled the Marine advance for days begins to disintegrate. Bunkers that remain operational find their fields of fire blocked by burning positions, their crews unable to concentrate on their assigned sectors because flame tanks might engage them at any moment. Japanese soldiers who have been trained to fight to the death, who have accepted that they will not survive this battle, but are determined to exact maximum American casualties, now face a weapon that makes heroic last stands impossible. When liquid fire pours through your firing port, when flames consume the oxygen in your sealed bunker, when temperatures rise to levels that ignite flesh in uniforms, there is no opportunity for final defiant gestures or noble sacrifice. Death comes with mechanical certainty, reducing defenders to charred remains within seconds.
Colonel Nishi, receiving reports of the flame attacks from surviving observers, comprehends immediately that the defensive network he has constructed so carefully has been rendered obsolete in less than an hour. The Americans have developed a weapon specifically designed to defeat reinforced fortifications, and his defenders have no effective counter. He orders immediate evacuation of forward positions where possible, attempting to preserve his forces by withdrawing into the deeper tunnel networks where flame tanks cannot reach. But the order comes too late for hundreds of men trapped in bunkers now being systematically engaged by flame tanks, and the withdrawal itself exposes Japanese soldiers to marine rifle and machine gun fire as they attempt to retreat through connecting tunnels and emergency exits. The flame tank crews, having proven their weapons' effectiveness beyond any doubt, begin to develop aggressive confidence that marks the psychological transformation from defensive caution to offensive momentum. Staff Sergeant Hanlon, having engaged 3 separate bunkers with Satan's breath, reports fuel remaining for approximately 45 more seconds of firing time, enough for perhaps 4 more attacks. Lieutenant Wells coordinates with the supporting infantry, identifying targets that conventional weapons have failed to neutralize, vectoring his flame tanks toward positions that pose the greatest threat to Marine advancement. The flame tanks operate as precision instruments of destruction, each engagement calculated to achieve maximum effect while conserving the limited napalm supply. The supporting conventional Sherman tanks play crucial roles in the flame tank operations, providing suppressive fire that keeps Japanese anti-tank guns from engaging the vulnerable flame tanks during their attacks. Sergeant Harold Davidson, commanding a standard M4A3 Sherman designated Iron Resolve, positions his tank to cover Satan's breath during its approach to a bunker complex, his 75mm gun firing high explosive rounds at adjacent positions to suppress enemy observation. The Japanese defenders, fixated on the conventional tank firing at them, often fail to notice the flame tank maneuvering into firing position until it's too late. This coordination between conventional and flame armor proves essential to the flame tank survival, as their vulnerability during flame attacks makes them priority targets for any Japanese weapon that can engage them. The Marines advancing behind the flame tanks experience combat transformed from the grinding attrition of the previous days into rapid exploitation of enemy confusion and demoralization. Corporal Michael Donovan, squad leader in 2nd Platoon, Company E, 27th Marines, describes watching flame tanks engage bunkers that his squad had been unable to approach for 2 days, seeing the positions erupt in flame and smoke, then advancing through areas that minutes before were killing zones. The flame attacks create opportunities for infantry advancement by neutralizing mutually supporting positions, eliminating interlocking fields of fire, and destroying the carefully coordinated defensive network that Japanese commanders had constructed. Japanese attempts to counter the flame tanks proved desperate and largely ineffective. Sergeant Shimizu's anti-tank team attempts to engage Dragon's Roar with a magnetic mine, the close assault tactic that has worked against conventional armor in previous battles. But the standard Sherman providing security for the flame tank spots the Japanese soldiers emerging from their concealment, the coaxial machine gun cutting down 3 men before they can close within 20 yards of their intended target. The surviving team members retreat into tunnel systems, abandoning their attack. The psychological impact of watching flame tanks destroy bunker after bunker, overwhelming their training and discipline. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun, commanded by Corporal Yuki Tanaka, successfully engages a flame tank at 180 yards, the armor-piercing round striking the Sherman's frontal glacis plate at an oblique angle that causes the projectile to ricochet rather than penetrate. The flame tank Flame Bringer, commanded by Sergeant Robert Cheng, sustains damage to external fittings and loses one of its periscopes, but the crew remains uninjured and the critical fuel system intact. Cheng immediately engages the anti-tank gun position with his bow machine gun while maneuvering for a flame attack, the Japanese gun crew frantically attempting to reload before the American tank can close to effective flame range. The race between Japanese gunnery discipline and American flame tank tactics ends when Cheng's flame stream pours through the gun shield opening at 70 yards, the burning napalm consuming the crew and detonating stored ammunition that blows the gun off its mount. The psychological impact on Japanese defenders watching their comrades die inside burning bunkers cannot be overstated. Private Kenji Sato, manning a rifle position connected to the defensive network by communication trenches, receives fragmentary reports of flame attacks, hears screams echoing through tunnel systems, smells burning flesh and napalm carried on the wind, and understands that his own position might be next.
The certainty of death that Japanese soldiers have accepted as inevitable now transforms into specific horror about how that death might come. Trapped in a sealed bunker while liquid fire consumes everything, burning alive while concrete walls prevent escape, dying from asphyxiation as flames consume all oxygen in sealed spaces. This transformation from abstract acceptance of death to concrete fear of particular methods of dying erodes morale and combat effectiveness even among the most dedicated defenders. Lieutenant Wells, coordinating his flame tank platoon through increasingly confused tactical situations, makes rapid decisions about target priorities as opportunities appear and disappear. A Japanese command bunker identified by Marine intelligence becomes his next objective, the position reportedly housing senior officers coordinating the defensive network. Two flame tanks, Satan's Breath and Hell's Herald, approach from different angles, their converging fields of fire meant to saturate the bunker from multiple directions simultaneously. The command bunker, constructed with exceptional care and reinforced beyond standard specifications, features multiple compartments, several entrances, and communication equipment connecting it to the defensive network.
Major Hori, inside the command bunker coordinating the defensive effort, receives reports of flame attacks, destroying position after position, understands that his careful planning has been rendered obsolete, and attempts to organize withdrawal into deeper positions before the Americans can complete their breakthrough. His last message to Colonel Nishi, transmitted seconds before Satan's Breath and Hell's Herald engage his bunker simultaneously from different angles, describes the situation as tactically untenable and recommends abandoning the northern plateau entirely. The message cuts off mid-transmission as napalm pours through 3 separate openings, the burning gel flooding the command post and igniting maps, documents, communications equipment, and the men attempting to operate them. By March 16th, when organized Japanese resistance on Iwo Jima effectively ends after 26 days of combat, the flame tanks have engaged over 400 separate positions, expending approximately 18,000 gallons of napalm to achieve effects that commanders estimate saved weeks of combat and thousands of American casualties. The weapon's tactical success proves so decisive that flame tanks become standard equipment for Marine divisions conducting amphibious operations against fortified positions. The lessons learned on Iwo Jima incorporated into doctrine for subsequent operations, including Okinawa. The legacy of flame tank operations on Iwo Jima extends far beyond the immediate tactical results, influencing American military thinking about urban warfare, fortification reduction, and the psychological dimensions of weapon effects. The flame tank demonstrates that innovative applications of existing technology can achieve results exceeding purpose-built systems, that psychological effects can prove as important as physical destruction, and that weapons specifically designed to counter enemy strengths rather than matching them directly can provide decisive advantages. The concept influences post-war development of military flame weapons, from man-portable flamethrowers to vehicle-mounted systems to aerial napalm bombs, all descended from the principles proven effective on Iwo Jima. The Japanese military's post-war analysis of the Iwo Jima defeat identifies flame tanks as one of 3 critical American innovations that made the island's defense untenable, alongside concentrated naval gunfire and the integration of close air support with ground operations. General Kuribayashi's final messages before his death in late March 1945 specifically mentioned flame attacks as having destroyed the defensive integrity of our fortified positions, acknowledging that Japanese engineering and tactical planning had not anticipated weapons capable of defeating reinforced concrete fortifications through the introduction of fire into sealed spaces. The admission represents recognition that American innovation had fundamentally altered the tactical calculus of island warfare in ways Japanese defenders could not counter. Staff Sergeant Hanlon, surviving the entire Iwo Jima campaign and the subsequent Okinawa operation, where flame tanks again proved decisive, reflects in post-war interviews that operating flame tanks created unique psychological burdens for crews who understood the horrific effects of their weapon on enemy soldiers. The knowledge that squeezing the trigger pours liquid fire into sealed spaces where men burn alive or suffocate, that the weapon kills with certainty and agony that exceeds most combat deaths, weighs on consciences despite the military necessity and lives saved. Hanlon describes recurring dreams about Japanese soldiers burning inside bunkers,
their screams audible even over engine noise, images that persist decades after the war ends. The final accounting of flame tank effectiveness on Iwo Jima documents 447 Japanese positions destroyed or neutralized through flame attacks, estimated casualties exceeding 3,200 enemy soldiers killed directly by napalm or its effects, and estimated savings of 2,000 to 3,000 American casualties that would have resulted from conventional reduction of the same fortifications. The cost includes 3 flame tanks destroyed, 2 by anti-tank guns, 1 by a mine, 12 crew members killed, and approximately 19,000 gallons of napalm expended over 26 days of operations. The tactical exchange ratio far exceeds that achieved by any other weapon system employed on Iwo Jima, demonstrating the flame tank's unique effectiveness against the specific challenges of reducing fortified positions. The story of flame tanks on Iwo Jima ultimately represents the intersection of American technological innovation, Japanese defensive engineering, and the brutal mathematics of island warfare, where every tactical advantage translates directly into lives saved or lost. Colonel Nishi's confidence on the morning of February 23, 1945, that his fortifications would protect his men proved tragically misplaced, not through any failure of engineering or courage, but because American innovation created weapons specifically designed to defeat the very strengths of Japanese defensive positions. The flame that poured through concrete walls and steel doors on Iwo Jima represented more than just a new weapon. It symbolized the American capacity to adapt, innovate, and overcome obstacles through technological solutions applied with ruthless efficiency. The crews who operated flame tanks on Iwo Jima and subsequent operations knew they wielded weapons of unprecedented horror, but they also understood that those weapons saved the lives of fellow Marines who otherwise would have died assaulting fortified positions with rifles and grenades. This tension between the moral weight of the weapon's effects and the practical necessity of its employment defined the flame tank experience, creating psychological burdens that veterans carried long after the war ended. The sight of bunkers burning, the smell of napalm and burning flesh, the knowledge of how men died inside those concrete tombs remained with crews decades after the battles ended. In the final analysis, the flame tank operations on Iwo Jima demonstrate warfare's fundamental characteristic, that tactical innovation can overcome even the strongest defenses, that no fortress remains impregnable against weapons specifically designed to exploit its weaknesses, and that the side capable of adapting most rapidly to new challenges gains decisive advantages. The Japanese defenders who stood confidently in their reinforced bunkers on February 23, 1945, believing their positions impregnable, learned within hours that American engineers had created weapons rendering their fortifications obsolete. The flame that destroyed their defenses represented not just military technology, but a philosophy of warfare emphasizing innovation, adaptation, and the willingness to employ whatever means necessary to achieve victory while minimizing friendly casualties. The legacy of those flame attacks continues influencing military thinking about fortification reduction, urban warfare, and the psychological dimensions of weapon effects, proving that the lessons learned in volcanic ash and burning concrete remain relevant decades after the battles ended.